Hi, this is Amanda Winter from Livingston Public Library, and I'm here sharing with you a lesson on how to crochet a small bag. This lesson has been divided into 4 parts, and this is part 3. If you haven't already, I recommend you go back and watch and follow with part 1 and 2 so that you'll be ready to start the directions for part 3. Before we begin the next portion of the bag, the top flap, we left off at round 17 of the sides of the bag. So you should have completed up to round 17 and be just ready to slip stitch and fasten off, and that's what I'm going to do now before we go on to how to do the top flap. So that's round 17 on that last stitch. So what I'm going to do is I've cut the yarn and I'm going to insert the hook into the next stitch. I'm going to wrap the yarn around the hook, pull it through. I'm going to pull off that bottom loop and I'm going to pull until it goes all the way through, and then I'm going to move the stitch marker so that I can pull more on that knot and tighten it. As you can see, it's secure, it's not going to come apart. So we have fastened off the sides of the bag. So now we're going to need to count some stitches to do the top flap. So first step is to count 11 stitches. Here it is, and I'm going to take my stitch marker and I'm going to mark that stitch. So now we need to reattach some yarn. So here's some more yarn. I have the tail end facing toward me. Move that down to give me some more space. I'm going to bend it up to make the slip knot, so we make that number 6. We bend the tail portion behind the loop. Hold the yarn with the pointer finger and the thumb. And then I pick up that center loop with the hook. And pull to form the knot. And we adjust it so it's not too big, but also not so tight, because we want it to be able to move freely up and down the hook. So now that we have our slip knot, we're going to go into that stitch that we've marked. And I'm going to loop the yarn around the hook, pull it back through, and I'm going to pull off that loop, and the yarn is now attached to the work. So we're going to go back into that stitch, having wrapped the yarn around, and we're going to make that first double crochet stitch. So wrap it, pull 2 off, wrap it, pull 2 off, and we've now made our first stitch in row 1 of the top flap. So I'm going to move my stitch marker. Looks like it's a little stuck. There we go. And I'm going to put it into that stitch. And we'll now just be going back and forth and not in a circle, so that's why we're doing rows. And we need to do 11 more double crochets, each one in a stitch by itself. So that's the work I just did. I'm going to go into the next stitch. So having wrapped the yarn around, I'm going to insert it, wrap it again, come out, wrap it, pull off 2, wrap it, pull off 2, and I'm going to go into the next stitch. And I'm just going to continue down the row. Again, if you're comfortable with this and you feel you don't need to watch this part, you can fast forward a little bit. I'm including it just because if you're still learning the stitch, sometimes it's helpful to watch the stitch being made. As you go, don't forget to occasionally tug the work to make sure that you're going in the right stitch. So you'll tug the work and you'll be going into the stitch to the left of the one that moved. Also, you want to make sure that you count. The goal, including our first stitch, is to have a total of 12 all together. And if you're feeling comfortable, you see that I'm using my fingers to move the loops. I'm doing that because it slows the whole process down, so it's easier for you to see what's going on. But if you're comfortable, you can try maybe twisting the hook instead of using your fingers to pull them through the loops. But if you're not comfortable with that yet, that's totally fine. You can just use your fingers to move them. I'm just going to take a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 all together. So we need 3 more. Go. Okay. And we need 1 more right in there. I'm going to just count real quick to make sure we have the number of stitches needed. And yes, we have 12. So now we're going to turn the work just like the page of a book, so that we can move on to row 2. So here I got my row counter. I'm on row 2. And the directions are that we're going to do 12 double crochet stitches, but we're only going to do it in the back loop. So remember, there's 2 loops to every stitch. The one nearest is the front, but the one farther away is back, and that's the one we're using, the back loop. So just very carefully ease the hook into just that back loop of the first stitch, and you're going to wrap the yarn. Pull off 2 stitches, pull off 2 more, and we're going to mark that first stitch. That is the first stitch of row 2 in the back loops. So you're going into the next stitch, going into the loop further away, the back loop, and wrap it, pull it through, wrap it, pull off 2, wrap it, pull off 2. Now we're going to go into the next one, into that back loop. There we go. I'm just going to continue down the row just because this is a little different, so you can follow along if you need to. If you're feeling a little more confident, you can just fast forward a bit. It is up to you. And as you go, you can tug the work a little bit just to make sure of the stitch you need to go into. When you pull on the work, the stitch that you just did is the one that moves, and the one to the left of it will be the one that you're going into. You don't need to worry as much about counting because we now have marked the first and last stitch of each row, so you clearly know where you started and you know where you stopped too. That's another advantage of using stitch markers. There you go, careful so as not to miss a stitch. Okay, we got 2 more stitches. This one and then the one that the stitch marker is in. And the stitch marker is actually marking the back loop, so I'm going to remove it to make it a little easier to get in there. So I've wrapped the hook. I'm going to put it into that back loop of the last stitch. wrap it again, pull it back, and there you go. We've completed the 12th stitch, and we turn the work just like the pages of a book to get to that next row. So now we're on row 3, and we're just going to do 12 double crochets, 1 in each stitch. So we're going to do it in that first one, and pull off 2, wrap it, pull off 2. Make sure to put that stitch marker into that first stitch of now row 3, so you know where you are. And as you can see, the directions just continue. This one is just going to be in the front and back loops together for this row, row 3, and up through row 8. So just be sure you're catching both the front and back loop each time you're putting the hook into this stitch. So you're just going to continue like that, double crocheting, 1 per stitch. And the stitch markers are very useful in helping you see where the beginning and end of your rows are. Once you reach the end of row 8, you can try fastening off, but if you want some extra help, I'll go over that again at the beginning of part 4. So good luck, and I look forward to seeing you in part 4 of this lesson.